The restaurant was the kind that whispered luxury, golden lights, clinking glass, and the faint hum of a jazz trio playing in the corner. Everything smelled of roasted rosemary and expensive wine. Amelia Brooks had chosen this place carefully. It wasn't too loud, not too crowded, and elegant enough to make her feel like she belonged there, not just a woman in a wheelchair, but a woman on a date. She had spent 2 hours getting ready, curling her chestnut hair and applying a shade of lipstick she hadn't worn in years, rosewood, the one her sister said made her eyes glow. The navy dress she wore flowed beautifully over her lap, its lace sleeves soft against her skin. When she'd first seen herself in the mirror, she almost believed she looked like her old self, before the accident, before the pitying stares and awkward silences. Her date, Jason, had seemed charming enough online. He had sent her good morning texts, complimented her smile, and insisted that he didn't care about her condition. But when they met that evening, she had noticed the flicker, that momentary pause when he saw the wheelchair. His smile had tightened, just a little. Still, he'd sat down, ordered a drink, and made polite conversation about work, travel, and movies. She tried her best to keep it light, ignoring the way his eyes darted away whenever someone glanced at them. Then came the phone call. "Just a minute," he'd said, flashing an apologetic grin before stepping outside. That was 35 minutes ago. Now, Amelia sat alone, staring at the untouched plate across from her. The candle between them had burned low, its wax pooling like the slow drip of her patience. Every few minutes, a waiter passed by, glancing at her table with the same careful sympathy people reserved for things too sad to look at for long. She forced herself to breathe evenly, tracing the edge of her napkin. Maybe he got stuck in traffic on the way back, she lied to herself. Maybe his phone died, but deep down, she knew the truth: Jason wasn't coming back. Her throat tightened. The laughter from the next table felt sharper now, almost cruel. She reached for her glass of water to distract herself, but her hand trembled slightly, the sound of the ice clinking against the rim louder than it should have been. "Would you like me to clear the second plate, ma'am?" the waiter asked softly, his voice a blend of politeness and pity. Amelia looked up and smiled, the kind of practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Not yet," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. When the waiter left, she turned toward the window. Outside, city lights shimmered on the wet pavement. She watched them blur as her vision filled with tears she refused to let fall. For a long, aching moment, she simply sat there, a beautiful woman in a beautiful dress, pretending she hadn't been abandoned. And that was when the doorbell chimed. The entrance bell chimed, soft but clear, cutting through the low hum of conversation and music. Amelia barely looked up at first. The sound meant nothing to her, just another couple coming in, maybe another reminder of everything she wasn't a part of anymore. But the murmur of voices near the door shifted, and curiosity tugged at her eyes. A tall man stepped into the restaurant, shaking the drizzle from his coat. He had the kind of presence that commanded attention without trying, sharp lines, quiet confidence, and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. His suit was tailored to perfection, charcoal gray with a subtle sheen that caught the golden light. The maitre d' straightened immediately, offering a deferential smile. This wasn't the kind of man who needed introductions. Beside him trotted a little boy, no older than 6, holding a stuffed bear with one arm and his father's hand with the other. The boy's hair was the same dark shade as the man's, but his eyes were wide and curious, full of unfiltered wonder. He bounced slightly as they walked, his small shoes tapping against the marble floor. Amelia couldn't help watching them. The man's expression softened every time he glanced at his son, the kind of tenderness that came from someone who'd learned to treasure what was left after losing too much. They paused at the host stand, and Amelia caught a fragment of the conversation. "Table for 2, please," the man said, his voice deep, smooth, but carrying a faint weariness, the kind that never really leaves. The host nodded quickly and gestured toward a corner table, but before they could move, the little boy tugged on his father's sleeve and pointed across the room, straight at Amelia. "Daddy," he whispered, not quite softly enough. "That lady looks sad." Amelia froze. Heat rushed to her face, embarrassment flooding through her. She turned quickly toward the window, pretending not to hear. The father followed his son's gaze. For a moment, his eyes met hers, steady, dark, assessing. There was no pity there, no awkwardness. Just a quiet kind of understanding that made her chest tighten. He crouched down beside his son, murmuring something she couldn't hear. The boy nodded, though his gaze lingered on Amelia, earnest and innocent. A few seconds later, she heard footsteps approaching. "Excuse me," came the man's voice, calm and deep, the kind that made people listen. Amelia turned, startled. He stood beside her table, his little boy peeking from behind his leg. "I'm sorry if my son made you uncomfortable," he said, his tone sincere. He's still learning when to speak quietly. The corners of Amelia's lips lifted despite herself. "It's all right," she said softly. "He's just observant." The boy smiled, stepping forward. "You're pretty," he declared. "Do you want to sit with us? Daddy says eating alone is boring." Amelia blinked, caught between laughter and disbelief. The man chuckled, a deep, rich sound that melted the tension instantly. "I suppose that's his way of inviting you," he said. "I'm Alexander Grant." The name clicked instantly. Even she had heard of him, the elusive billionaire CEO whose company built half the skyline around them. She hesitated, unsure what to say. Finally, she managed, "Amelia Brooks." Alexander smiled faintly. "Well, Miss Brooks, my son seems to think our evening won't be complete without your company. Would you join us?" For the first time all evening, Amelia's heart lifted. She glanced at the empty chair across from her, the one meant for someone who had chosen to leave, then at the little boy, whose bright eyes held nothing but kindness. "I'd love to," she whispered. The waiter moved quickly to rearrange the table, clearing Jason's untouched plate and bringing a smaller chair for Ethan. Amelia felt a flutter of nervousness as Alexander held her gaze, his polite smile easing what little embarrassment lingered. Ethan climbed into his seat with the confidence of a prince who had just made a royal decree. "Daddy," she said. "Yes," he announced triumphantly, clutching his stuffed bear in one arm. Alexander chuckled. "So she did." He turned to Amelia, his tone softening. "Thank you. My son can be a bit persistent when he wants something." Amelia smiled shyly, tucking a stray curl behind her ear. "It's all right. He's charming, and much better company than I expected tonight." For a fleeting second, their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. Then the waiter returned, taking their orders. Ethan ordered pancakes, despite the dinner menu, insisting it was his special day. Alexander didn't argue, just smiled and ordered a steak for himself, then glanced at Amelia. "Would you like to keep your original order?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, thank you." The conversation began hesitantly, like a melody searching for rhythm. Amelia expected the usual, the cautious small talk, the awkward pauses people often had around her, but it never came. Alexander spoke to her as if she were any other woman dining alone, not someone fragile or broken. He asked about her work, her interests, the books she liked to read. "I'm a freelance editor," she told him. "Mostly novels. I spend half my days reading stories other people have written." He smiled thoughtfully. "So you fix other people's words?" "Something like that," she said, laughing softly. "Though some stories don't really need fixing. Just understanding." He nodded, as if her words struck a deeper chord than she meant them to. "I know what you mean." Meanwhile, Ethan chatted animatedly between bites of pancake, his syrup-sticky fingers waving as he told stories about his school, his friends, and his bear, who, apparently, had a secret name known only to him. Amelia found herself laughing more than she had in months. Ethan's honesty, his pure lack of judgment, was disarming. "Your son's wonderful," she said quietly when Ethan ran off to the restroom. Alexander's smile softened. "He's my entire world. His mother passed away 3 years ago. Since then, well, it's been the two of us." "I'm sorry," Amelia said gently. He nodded, eyes distant for a moment. "It's all right. He keeps me grounded. Kids have a way of reminding you that life still has color." She looked at him then, really looked. Beneath the polished exterior, there was a man who carried his own kind of loneliness, different from hers but no less real. And somehow, sitting there with him, the world felt less heavy. When Ethan returned, he climbed into his chair again and smiled at Amelia. "Daddy, can she come next time too?" Alexander laughed quietly. "We'll have to ask her, won't we?" Amelia blinked, her heart fluttering at the innocent invitation. "I'd like that," she said softly. And as laughter drifted between them, mingling with the soft music and clinking glass, Amelia realized something profound. She had come expecting rejection and loneliness, but found warmth, kindness, and maybe even the fragile beginnings of hope. By the time dinner ended, the restaurant had begun to thin out. The jazz band was packing up, leaving behind the faint scent of candle wax and coffee. Amelia hadn't realized how late it had gotten. The laughter, the conversation, the lightness, they'd carried her through the hours like a current she hadn't wanted to fight. Ethan was yawning now, his stuffed bear tucked under his arm, eyelids fluttering as he fought sleep. Alexander lifted him effortlessly from the chair and rested him against his shoulder. The sight stirred something deep in Amelia's chest, a tenderness she hadn't felt in years. "Thank you for joining us tonight," Alexander said, his voice gentle. "It's been a while since I've seen my son this happy." Amelia smiled, her heart aching in the best way. "He's a bright little boy. You must be very proud." "I am," he said, adjusting Ethan's small jacket. "He's my reminder to keep showing up, no matter how hard life gets." The words lingered between them. Amelia glanced down at her folded napkin, then at the empty plate across from her. She had arrived at this table expecting heartbreak, and somehow, it had turned into healing. When they stepped outside, a cool drizzle had settled over the city. Streetlights glowed like blurred halos through the mist, and the air smelled faintly of rain and promise. Amelia's driver hadn't arrived yet, so she waited beneath the canopy. Alexander stood beside her, shielding Ethan with his coat. "Did you have a good evening?" he asked quietly. She hesitated, then smiled. "I did, more than I expected." He studied her face, his eyes steady but kind. "I'm glad. You deserve that." A car pulled up at the curb, sleek and black, the kind that only people like Alexander Grant used without thinking. The driver stepped out to open the door, but Alexander gestured for him to wait. He reached into his jacket pocket and took out a small business card, cream paper, embossed letters, simple and elegant. "In case plans change again," he said, holding it out. "Or if you ever feel like sharing another dinner, one that starts on purpose this time." Amelia's hand brushed his as she took it. The brief touch sent a quiet thrill through her, startling in its warmth. She tucked the card carefully into her clutch, as though it were something fragile and precious. "I might just take you up on that," she said softly. Alexander's smile deepened, faint but sincere. "I hope you do." Ethan stirred against his shoulder, blinking sleepily. "Bye, Miss Amelia," he mumbled, voice thick with drowsiness. "Next time, I'll bring my bear a chair, too." Amelia laughed, a genuine, unguarded sound. "I'll hold you to that, Ethan." As the car door closed and the vehicle pulled away, she stood under the glow of the street lamp, watching until the taillights disappeared into the rain. The city around her shimmered, reflections dancing on the wet pavement. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel abandoned. She didn't feel invisible, she felt seen. The night that had begun with loneliness had ended with something infinitely rarer, the quiet beginning of hope. And as she rolled toward her waiting cab, Amelia Brooks couldn't help but smile at the thought that sometimes, the best things in life don't arrive when you plan for them. They simply walk in, wearing a tailored suit and holding a little boy's hand.